So I think I'm getting better at this YouTube live thing. Okay, we got about a 5 second delay on our Spodoinkle. That's okay. So welcome to the Authortube. Welcome back, everybody. I'm the King for Mayor. I'm also Ken Poirier, the author of Fake Tattoos, which is kind of the spawning point for this Lovecraftian horror thing. So I recently did a re-edit and re-release of Fake Tattoos. So second edition is out now. It looks kind of like this. The cover's changed a little bit, especially the back is different. I just kind of went with like the cover creator at first, and I was like, no, God, that's awful. And so I fixed that. And then the front cover is the circle's a little smaller. But that's the main difference. Anyway, so this book is here. Let me. So we're talking about Lovecraftian horror, which comes from Lovecraft. So H.P. Lovecraft, Cthulhu, and the unseen, and all that stuff. Leviathans and that fun stuff. I think that was what was that? Lovecraft was, I want to say, season. I want to say it was season 7 of Supernatural. If you watch Supernatural, if you're into horror, you probably watch Supernatural like I do. But basically, the Leviathans, after they stop the apocalypse, which opens up the door to the ancient ones. That's basically Lovecraft is what we're talking about here. Lovecraftian horror. And I watched a couple videos on Lovecraftian horror, although everybody had a different name for it, and that's kind of what prompted me to make this video, because I was trying to relate it to this, because I like Lovecraftian horror, but I can't really ever say that I've really sat down and read a bunch of H.P. Lovecraft. I think I did read it once, like at least a story or two, but I can't say I really remember it. It would have been when I was very younger. I was a real big horror fan when I was in middle school and high school, and kind of dropped out of it a bit after that. But I mean, when I was an adult, in my 20s, I remember playing Call of Cthulhu, the RPG, and I loved it. And, I was already a big White Wolf, vampire, mage, the Ascension guy, and played with the Vampire the Masquerade a little bit, but it was hard finding good people to play with, because either they didn't know what they were doing or they were too serious when it came to Vampire. I love Vampire. I like the whole, I like the LARPing aspect to it, but it can get a little bit too far. And if you don't have a good dungeon master, it can become the one person show. But anyway, I'm sidetracking. Let's not talk about White Wolf RPGs. But yeah, I did play the Call of Cthulhu is the name of the Lovecraft RPG, and that was great. Because the unseen horror, and it was a lot of fun. And even though I took it to some ridiculous directions myself. Speaking of gamers who take their characters too seriously, but other than that, it was a great setting. It was awesome. I'm gonna go to the screen now. So. Lovecraftian horror, right? Is I almost never hear people say Lovecraftian horror anymore. Speaking of which, if you haven't, Clive Barker. That's my main. That's what I meant to say. Get to. Clive Barker is he is my Lovecraftian horror. Like, he's the guy who is I like, as far as I'm concerned, Clive Barker is more Lovecraft than Lovecraft. I mean, like, even the stuff that's just like based off of Lovecraft. like I said, I have read bits and pieces of it, and I certainly read lots of quotes, see it quoted a lot, and the how it's things are spoken, and the ideas behind them, which it does have a lot of that Victorian influence. That's the thing with Lovecraft books, is they have that strong Victorian influence that you're going to see from things like what's the guy who goes to Mars, like that's a sci-fi, right? John Carter of Mars, right? That's a sci-fi, but it's more a Victorian story than it is a sci-fi, especially the beginning before he goes to Mars. He's in that creepy old mansion, and like, that just that kind of the a world in entropy is the best way to describe it. That you go into the crypt, and like all this stuff, like that idea of crumbling and oldness and rot, and that's very much in that Victorian literature, because as you know, the environmental conditions from industrialization were not good at the time, and so there's a lot of influence into that. um, but anyway, back to Clive Barker. You have, especially in the films that have been made of his work, it comes across very strongly this idea of the other worldly, other, the the horror from the other side, and not just ghosts, like powerful entities, and the idea of a entity whose power is beyond the comprehension of a mortal human, and that's what I really try to get across in Fake Tattoos, with all the Satan and God and all that. I just like, well, these guys are pretty big. They'll work. I don't need a monster from outer space. God and the devil, that sounds plenty scary for me. Um, but to get off of my book now, we can get on to this. Clive Barker, you've got the Hellraiser series, of course, but if you see his he's got a lot of other movies too. I want to say Lord of Illusions is his, but it might not be. It definitely would fit in. No, Lord of Illusions, that's definitely Clive Barker. What was the other one I was thinking of? Not I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's called shoot. It's the one where it's the guy, he's the agent for the author. That one's very Lovecraft. I know I've seen all sorts of documentaries about how they took everything from H.P. Lovecraft. I don't know if that's Clive Barker, though. What's that one called? In the Mouth of Madness. That one's really good. Check that one out if you haven't. And then Clive Barker's got a lot of other lower budget ones, but they all have this idea of there's entities beyond our realm, and if you can tap into those, you can get power, but you'll never be able to control that power, because it's too much for a human being. And that's like the main theme in all of these Clive Barker stories. So Lovecraftian horror, the different names that I've been hearing in these YouTube video essays and stuff, and things I've been reading. So cosmic horror, everyone's pretty much like the same page. So everybody's like cosmic horror, Lovecraftian horror. These are like almost synonyms, right? They're not, because obviously why would you have two different words that mean the exact same thing? That makes no sense. But the horror of the unknown, right? More than gore or element shock. So the idea of something, it's like something you know exists, but you can't make sense of it. You can't put your fingers on it. Your brain. It's like a good example of this is people talk about the Native Americans and the ships when the pilgrims came, and I don't know if this is a true story or not, but they talk about this a lot, and they said that when the pilgrims came, the Indians thought they just appeared, like they came in these little boats, and they're like, how did you travel across the water in these little boats? And like, we took the ships, and they pointed at the ships in the water. And again, I don't have no idea if this is true or just some made up antidote, but they pointed at the ships, and the Native Americans, according to the story, couldn't see them. They're like, "What are you talking about? You mean those clouds over there? You mean by those rocks?" Like they'd never seen a ship before, and so in their minds, right, they knew what a boat was. Right, but they'd never seen a sailing ship before, and they're like, they couldn't comprehend the idea that something that large could be a ship. So it must be a rock or clouds. The sails are clouds. The bottom of the ship is a rock, or something. A new island, a little island off in the distance. And then it was only when they put them on the boat, took them out to the ship, and they stepped onto the ship. Then they understood, and then when they went back, they could see the ships again. Okay, that's the story. Don't know if it's true, but it's kind of like that concept of having these beings that are beyond human comprehension, right? So that's like the cosmic horror, and I'm guessing they use the word cosmic to say like it comes from outer space, right? Right, Lovecraftian horror, like, because cosmic means like cosmos, right? Let's look it up. Let's just look up cosmic, right? Let's break the language down. Cosmic, relating to the universe or cosmos, especially as distinct from the earth. Inconceivable, vast. So yeah, so out in the idea that the universe is so large that there are things in it that we can't even begin to imagine, right? So when I think cosmic, that's why I think like a movie like Alien, right? Like with Ripley, and she fights the alien on the ship. They go to the planet and they get the face huggers and all that. I mean, like that, I would feel like that's a cosmic horror, even though it's humans going out into space. In that sense, it's a sci-fi, of course. But the idea that there's just something that's so beyond the comprehension of the crew of the ship that they're just completely powerless against it, and just like it's almost luck, almost practically luck at the end. I mean, yes, Ripley was active, and she was reacting, and just like it's almost like a trapped rat being chased by a cat, and the condition came that's just right that she could jettison that alien out of the ship, and so. Like, it's almost luck. It's like this thing is just too powerful for you, and you're just not going to win. And she got lucky, and the thing got sucked out into space. And so like I would say that's great cosmic horror right there. If I'm going to think cosmic horror, but there's these also these other words I've heard to describe Lovecraftian horror lately, and they're very different than what I would consider the concept of cosmic horror. Now, the first one, this one I heard today, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of academic consensus on the use of this term, but it seems like a couple people have used it, and that is transcendental horror. I like that concept, when you think of stories like Metamorphosis, right? I think that's a good, what I would call like a transcendental horror, because I think when I think transcendental, you think like transcending, changing, becoming something beyond what you are, right? Whether that's in a spiritual sense or a physical sense. Um, it's like an awakening to a new life that gives you a perspective on your old life you haven't had. And so like I think Clive Barker, going back to Clive Barker again, um and looking at Hellraiser, right? That's somebody who's searching for this transcendental experience to experience the gods, right? Again, this is, if you're into this stuff, I have this book called Fake Tattoos. Yeah, this is I'm talking, but I'm really talking about stuff. But yeah, don't forget, this is a promo. So anyway, I need money. Um, so anyway, the transcendental horror, you have Hellraiser, where their flesh is being torn. They're literally tearing the humanity away, and you've got these skeletons having sex and all this crazy stuff. They're going for something that's beyond what a human can experience, and from the human perspective, that's horrifying. From the perspective of the person who's going through the transformation, it's almost like it's like a release. And another movie, not Clive Barker, just been in my back of my head lately. It's called The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. I need to do a rewatch of this, because when I left the theater, right, I was like, man, that was scary as hell. I couldn't believe that was like the scariest movie I've seen in a long time. And my friend was like, what are you talking about? That was a comedy. We just watched a comedy film. He thought the thing was hilarious. So we both got this completely different thing out of it. I think what I was relaying to is this idea of the transcendental horror, in that this guy Michael J. Fox portrays, he's a psychic who can see ghosts, and the idea of life beyond death, and he's aware of this, right? And but he's only experienced like the good of it, right? He's only experienced these ghosts that are like friendly or mischievous or annoying, and he's never encountered a real malevolent spirit before. And this idea of the fact that you could in death become this malevolent force that can affect the living in very serious, deadly ways. I thought that was a really scary concept. How it transitioned into that, and that's him not physically transformating, but he's spiritually, right, understanding his purpose and his abilities that other people don't have, and what they mean, and how that makes him see life and death differently than other people. So like I would put that into the transcendental horror category, because it doesn't always have to be this, transcendental doesn't have to be like this brutal stripping away, but it could be too. I mean, you could have a story where someone is trying to reach a higher spiritual level, and in order to do that, it requires sacrifice, and it isn't necessarily things he's choosing to sacrifice either, because he has to go through the transformation. And if he's unwilling to sacrifice it on his own, then the universe will sacrifice it for him. So when I think of like transcendentalism, that's another aspect of it. But yeah, there's only a very few people are using this transcendental horror term. And the last one is existential horror. This is another thing that I hear a lot when people talk about Lovecraftian horror. They talk about the existential horror, and this is tasteofcinema.com, and it's got a little you know, Google says this is good thing. Little box here, like, hey, everybody seems to think this person knows what they're talking about. So death is usually it's Wikipedia, but this is Taste of Cinema this time. So kudos to you, Taste of Cinema. Death is a primal fear. Fear that death is certain is as existential. I think that's a very good explanation right there. Existential horror, therefore, can be defined as the dread and terror experienced by the individual upon realizing the circumstances of their existence, right? And so this is something that really fits into this, as well. I kind of, it's really hard to pin this book down. You go through a couple of different feelings as it goes on, but when the beginning of the book, the author is certain that he's going to die, right? The narrator is certain he's going to die. His death is imminent, right? And he wants to get things done before that happens. Is his motivation, not because he has cancer or anything like that. He just feels it. He feels that if things continue the way they're going, it's just going to be the end of him one way or another. So anyway, so that's another good example. Existential horror. Let's think of some other examples that we can come up with. Feel free to add some in the comments if you think there's something cool that I didn't talk about. Put it in the comment below. So existential horror. What's I would say with the way the Lovecraft stories structures work, you could say that there is some existentialism there, especially after you get over this kind of the cosmic horror part of it, where you see something you don't understand, and then it becomes existential, I would say, when the narrator who's seeing the witness, I guess is a good way to describe a Lovecraftian character, is a witness to something. Sometimes they're catalysts, sometimes they bring it forth by accident or on purpose, but either way, no matter how it comes along, the main character, the narrator is the witness. And upon witnessing this thing, this undescribable thing, they come over with an existential feeling, right? So that'd be like the end of the story, like, oh my God, monster, we're gonna die. and that's a simplification of the experience, but I think that's where I think this existential horror idea gets drawn into this Lovecraftian concept. What's another good? I would say that the ending, right? The ending of 2001. Right, is another good example. Existential coming at the end of a horror novel is probably a really good spot for it. But the idea that you have, this robot that's killed off the entire crew of your ship, and I want to say, Michael Bowman, is that the name of the dude? Michael Bowman is the last man standing, and he can complete. Doesn't have his robot to help him anymore, which means the only way to complete his mission is to physically travel to the object. And so he gets into his pod and he goes to the obelisk, and you know, and just that he's being very calm facially the whole time this is happening, and all this stuff is coming at him, and that's just his modus operandus, right? His MO. But inside, you can see his eyes looking at stuff, and you can see like the gears ticking, like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? So, you know, like it's kind of like an acceptance in that last moments when he's in the obelisk and he sees himself there and he's the old man. You know, some people would say that it's a device used to show that time is advancing, but I think it's more than that, because we see him see himself, and I think that's what this really existentialism is, when you can come out of yourself and see that there's a big world with a big plan, and you're a very small part of that plan, and you're just not as important as you think you are. I think that's what the real existentialism is. I don't think existentialism is the fear of death, or the fear that you're going to die and then you're coming to terms with that. I mean, that's existential philosophy, you know, basic existential philosophy. But it's more the idea that you're going to die, and your life and your death is not going to matter very much to anybody except for a few people who care about you. And I think probably the smaller that number is, I think perhaps the more existential dread a person might have. You know, I think, you know, somebody who's incredibly famous would have less existential dread. You know, like somebody like Albert Einstein, I'm sure he feared death just like everybody else and dying, but knowing that he had made all these contributions to humanity and to science, and to know that people would be speaking his name for hundreds, if not thousands of years, I think that would definitely subdue a lot of those existential feelings of, you know, having that sense of accomplishment. But as you know, most people aren't Albert Einstein. Very few people are Albert Einstein. It's I think a lot of people can relate to that idea, or at least be very scared of that idea if they're not aware, if they're not self-aware enough, of to know that they have a place in the universe and it's not as big as they think it is. If they don't have that self-awareness, and to give somebody that self-awareness is probably one of the scariest things you could do to someone like that. If they could accept it at all, you know, if they don't go, I don't like this story. It's just silly. I mean, who does such things? They're like one of those kind of people. You know, it's nothing's gonna to crack that shell, but like the person who's willing to embrace that, I think they can get real scared from that kind of a story, and come to learn to enjoy it. You know, they might not enjoy it the first time around, but then they might start watching In the Mouth of Madness or Lord of the Illusions or one of those other great films, and really have a good time. But I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to say about this Lovecraftian horror thing. If you think there's something I should have said that I didn't say, then you should do it. And my friend Regina St. Clair, she just put up a Lord of the Rings video. You should check that out. I might have to do my own Lord of the Rings story here. Because, I think a lot of people have that Lord of the Rings experience. Anyway, I'm Ken. Sun's shining. I got to hit my bike. I got to make some money. Doing some deliveries instead of writing because nobody's buying my book yet. Buy the book. Buy the book. Wow, wow, wow. And if you can't do that, subscribe. Leave a comment. Hit that like. Hit that thumbs up button. Or does it go this way? 2 thumbs up. All right. Everybody, you have a good day.